There's a lot of ways to be as a person, and some people express their deep appreciation in different ways. But one of the ways that I believe people express their appreciation to the rest of humanity is to make something wonderful and put it out there. And you may never meet the people, you may never shake their hands, you never hear their stories or tell yours. But somehow, in the act of making something with a great deal of care and love, something transmits there. And it's a way of expressing to the rest of our species our deep appreciation. So we need to be true to who we are and remember what's really important to us. Steve, 2007. That is an excerpt from one of my favorite books of the year. It's a PDF called Make Something Wonderful, and it's all of his writings, and it's one of the best books I've ever read. The cool thing about this PDF is that they actually gave hard copies to the employees of Apple, so it's actually really hard to buy. I think on eBay they're trading at like $200, but this book is so amazing. I hopefully will get a copy of one soon. But this one has just been one of the best books. I want to go through it because Steve has all these different ways of thinking that I want to put into a open book. So let's start. So the first lesson's on failure. At the age of 30, Steve Jobs was kicked out of his company, Apple, that he started. During these like quiet years where he was working, he actually started two companies. He started Next, which is a computer software company, and then he went on to start buy Pixar. So he bought Pixar from a division within George Lucas's company, and it became what we all know. So that was actually what made Steve Jobs a billionaire. It wasn't actually Apple. He would come back later and do iPhones and all the things that we know Steve Jobs a lot for. Another book I would recommend while I'm talking about this is Creative Inc. By Ed Catmull. We actually interviewed him with Read More and George Lucas, A Life. It kind of goes into this a little bit and gives you a little bit more context about this deal. Steve would go on to say, life's funny in this way when he's talking about failure. Sometimes your greatest strengths are your greatest weaknesses. Sometimes your greatest adversities you learn the most from. I don't know. I remember talking to Waz, who was his co-founder, and saying we may fail, but we have no responsibility now. We have no wives, no kids, no house payments, nothing. If we don't do this now, we never will. We have nothing to lose. The worst we'll get out of this is that we'll have the memories of having gone after something. He went on to say, to give ourselves the experience of participating in what Bill Hewitt and David Packard did. Those are the Hewitt and Packard founders, to find a company or to start a company. So rather than invest in better cars or better apartments or our bank accounts, we decided to invest in ourselves. I think this is a great lesson for founders as well as just people in general, is that sometimes you have to put yourself out there and try to go for something excellent, even if it may fail. Second takeaway I got was Steve talks a lot about his aesthetic. And if you know how clean and chic the iPhone and some of the other products were, I thought it was really good that Steve went into this. Steve Jobs designed some of the greatest products in history, from the PC to the iPhone to the iPad. Here's what Steve had to say about design and aesthetic. Your aesthetic gets better as you make mistakes. But the real big thing is this. If you're going to make something, it doesn't take any more energy and rarely does it take any more money to make it really great. All it takes is a little bit more time and not that much more, and a willingness to do so, a willingness to persevere until it's great. And I think in the same way, good aesthetic results from just your eye, an instinct of what you see, and not so much what you do. You see this all the way through with Apple products, like Steve's push for a great product. I think what made him unique was more than almost any founder was the ability to push until a product was great. Most times, a lot of people put out a product that's like, hey, get it out quick, or lean startup. There's so many different things that people always say, but I think Steve, in his ability to fight for a great product, is why Apple products for so long have been a staple of our civilization, our society. All right, let's get into marketing. Steve has been one of the best at marketing. Here's what Steve had to say on marketing. To me, marketing is about values. This is a very complicated world. It's a very noisy world, and we're not going to get a chance to get people to remember much about us. No company is. So we have to be really clear on what we want them to know about us. The dairy industry tried for 20 years to convince you that milk was good for you. It's a lie, but they tried anyways. And the sales were going like this. And then they tried Got Milk, and the sales started going like this. Got Milk. That doesn't even talk about the product. As a matter of fact, the focus is on the absence of a product. He then goes on to talk about Nike. He says, the best example of all, and one of the greatest jobs of marketing that the universe has ever seen, is Nike. Remember, Nike sells a commodity. They sell shoes. And yet, when you think of Nike, you feel something different than a shoe company. In their ads, as you know, they don't even talk about the product. They don't even tell you about their air soles and why they are better than Reebok's air soles. What does Nike do in their advertising? They honor great athletes and they honor great athletics. That's who they are. That's what they are about. Now, I think this is a great lesson on marketing. Like marketing at the end of the day is truth telling. If you fight for a great product in like we were talking about with design and aesthetic, then you can just tell the truth about how great your product is. And your product has to be focused on the people. Like for example, we have a social book clubbing app. We're not talking about, oh, it has this feature and this feature that makes it cool. Like those features are important, but what really makes a great app is the bookish content creators, the community, the stories behind the books. Like books are at the end of the day, what touch human souls. They're tools to tell great stories. So when you honor those things, you honor great authors, you honor great content creators, you build a community. That's what your brand should be focused on. So I think that was really great when it comes to marketing. And then here's what Steve had to say on making mistakes. You never achieve what you want without falling on your face a few times in the process of getting things right. I've tried not to be afraid to fail. And a matter of fact, I've failed quite a bit since leaving Apple. We'll make a huge amount of mistakes, but at least there'll be new and creative ones. And again, this is just proven lessons from anybody that's pursued something great. You're going to make tons and tons of mistakes. Your goal is to make sure that you fail forward at everything you do. One of the cool things Steve talks a lot about in this book is like the intersection of liberal arts and technology. And if you looked at old products like Microsoft, some of the time, like they were really tech enabled focus, but they were missing the human element. And Apple really fought for that. Steve said that they were at their best when they were at the intersection of liberal arts and technology. And he always talked about how he took this one class, this design class that talked about typography, fonts and things. And he said that was one of the most important classes that he ever took because it taught him how to look at the world from a liberal arts perspective. So this is one of my favorite parts because one of the things that I've really liked when we've been building our social book club and app is that we have built a really great team. And I've noticed that now as a leader, I can rely a lot on my team and I can go do what things that I'm better at. And so it has made it a really important thing. So I was really intrigued when Steve was talking about teams. So here's what he says on hiring great people. A players want to work with A players. They just don't want to work with C players. The first 10 hires are like 10% of your company. So he's like, you should really be focused on who you bring on to the company at the beginning. He said, in other words, great ideas come from anywhere and that we better sort of treat people in a much more egalitarian sense in terms of where the ideas come from. And Apple is a very bottom-up company when it comes to a lot of its great ideas. And we hired truly great people and gave them the room to do great work. He continued on by saying, a lot of companies, I know it sounds crazy, but a lot of companies don't do this. They hire people to tell them what to do. We hire people to tell us what to do. We figure we're paying them all this money. Their job is to figure out what to do and tell us how to do it. What I'm best at doing is finding a group of talented people and making things with them. But for me personally, I want to make things. Finally, he says, it's management by values. What this means is that you find people that want the same thing you want, and then you just get the hell out of their way. That was one of the mantras with Apple and Pixar. They recruited the most important people, the really great people. They found the right people, and that was really half the battle. So when you're building your teams, make sure you are really hiring people that are smarter than you. And you have to, as a leader, remove your ego and listen to those great people while making sure that and this kind of comes from a Elon book when he talks about a manic, he says, I forget the word he uses, but he talks about a strong sense of urgency. And what you as a leader need to do is get great people and then push the urgency so that you all can accomplish the things that you know they're capable of. One of the other things that Steve Jobs was really well known for was his intuition. Like he really felt the product. He made sure that he was building something that no one else was building. So he had a real in touch with his spirituality. One of his favorite books was the autobiography of a yogi. He had a spiritual leader. So Steve Jobs was really in tune with his intuition. And here's what he had to say about that. I've never been able to think of my work and my life as different things. They're the same. What you follow with your heart will indeed come back to you and to make your life much richer. A good way to remember these kind of intuitive feelings is to walk alone near sunset and spend a lot of time looking at the sky in general. We are never taught to listen to our intuitions, to develop and nurture our intuitions. But if you do pay attention to these subtle insights, you can make things come true. Seek out new dimensions of yourself, especially those that carry a romantic sense. But one has no way of knowing which of these paths will lead anywhere in advance. That's the wonderful thing about it, in a way. The only thing one can do is to believe that some of what you follow with your heart will indeed come back to make your life much richer. And it will. You will gain an even firmer truth of your instincts and intuition. I think that's just a really good lesson on life, is to trust your intuition. Life is very much, just as much as it is a mental and physical aspect, there's very much a spiritual and emotional component to it. And you can't neglect any of the four. You kind of have to have them all work in balance. And I think Steve does a really good job in a world where everything's about money and currency and how to make the next quarter, that Steve is talking about it from a sense of intuition and product and how to actually build something that makes people want it, make something wonderful, make something that actually makes the world a better place. And as we know, Steve is one of the most creative founders and innovative founders of his day. And I think it's important to hear what he has to say on creativity. He goes in and says, creativity equals connecting previously unrelated experiences and insights that others don't see. So in a lot of ways, remixing things that connect, right? You have to have them to connect them. Creative people feel guilty when they are simply relaying what they see. How do you get a more diverse set of experiences? Not by traveling the same path as everyone else. So to be a creative person, you need to feed or invest in yourself by exploring uncharted paths that are outside of the realms of your past experiences. And this is so true. And this is kind of why I enjoy traveling. It's not so much like, oh, I need to go on vacation. But I think when you meet new people and see different cultures and see the world, you have a better experience of like how to connect with people and touch the human soul. Starbucks founder Howard Schultz, he talked about this when he ended up going to Italy to find out how they did their coffee shops. And that's what he really brought back to America and the way Starbucks is today. So that's why it feels like a home that you can go do work and meet and commute and have a community there. But that comes from traveling. You don't ever necessarily get that from other spaces outside of having great conversations with people and reading. Like reading obviously is a form of traveling. You can travel to different worlds and connect with people. But in general, you have to get these experiences, and you have to figure out what lights you up. That goes into intuition. It's kind of following your joys and your happiness and kind of walking in spaces that you didn't need to know. I think Jeff Bezos talks about inventing and wandering. A lot of times it's like wandering, and all that wander aren't lost, so figuring out how to use wandering as a tool for your creativity. Steve kind of just talks about the journey a lot, and life as a journey and a means, and a means to an end, right? So it's an important journey through life. He says, make your avocation your vocation. Make what you love your work. The journey is the reward. People think that you have made it when you've gotten to the end of the rainbow and got the pot of gold, but they're wrong. The reward is in crossing the rainbow. That's easy for me to say. I got the pot of gold, literally. But if you get to the pot of gold, you already know that that's not the reward, and you go looking for another rainbow to cross. I think this is very true too. Just as far as, and then people say this all the time, but it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And I think that's really true when, just from my experiences from entrepreneurship, it's like the people you get to light up on the way to your goals, the people you get to impact, the stories you get to tell are just as important as getting to the end. So I think this is just sound wisdom all around, and it can be applied to many different domains. I saved this one for last because I think so many times people don't understand how important culture is. I know I talked a lot about it during team, and that's because I really believe in team and culture. I was an athlete growing up, so I really do fight for that. So Steve had a lot to say about culture, and he got a lot of this from Pixar. Like when he was first started Apple, when people kind of call him like the tyrant and they were saying he's a whiny brat, I think a lot of times they get that from his 22 to 30 years because Steve had an ability to be irrational and kind of be an a-hole. And that comes from not having seeing how great cultures work. So when he bought Pixar and he realized that he could have such a standoff approach and things would get done, all he had to do is, like I said, have that urgency when he was making sure to push great creativity. And that's just how it is. Even us YouTubers, we know like creativity sometimes when it's not managed can go like everywhere, right? So, but here's what he had to say on culture. So a strange thing happens. The hierarchy of power sort of inverts, and the CEO is actually at the bottom. And I sort of feel like I work for most of these people because they're the ones that are doing all the brilliant work. The best people are very hard to come by, and so it's management's job to support them because they're on the front lines doing the work. I like to get in there and help where I can, but my greatest joy is when we have people that are much better than I am at doing something. So I can forget about it and not worry about it and get on to doing something else where I can help. People continue to challenge me. It's a way we get to the right decisions, and I really enjoy it. We're trying to get back to the basics of great products, great marketing, and great distribution. And I'll end it with a message from Lorene, who was Steve Jobs' wife. She said, "It's hard enough to see what is already there, to gain a clear view. Steve's gift was greater still. He saw clearly what was not there and what could be there, what had to be there. His mind was never a captive of reality. Quite the contrary. He imagined what reality lacked and set out to redeem it. His ideas were not arguments, but intuitions, born of a true inner freedom and an epic sense of possibility." And this is from the book, Make Something Wonderful. I wish I had a book hardcover. If anybody has a hard copy, I would love to buy it from you. This is just kind of like level one. I would love to do a part two if you all find this helpful. As always, you can subscribe to Read More, which is our book media company, and we have a new social book clubbing app coming out called Bookem. You can go to www.bookemapp.com, and you can be the first to use our app. We have a Founders Club on Bookem, and if you want to join the Founders Club, we'll read books like this and discuss them in real time, which is cool because we have audio features and live podcasting. So we'd love for you to join our Founders Club. Thank you for listening to this. This is an open book, and I can't wait to do the next one. Take care.